and welcome to our first spring virtual meeting here at the lovely beginning of September. I won't try to produce any poems like Troppo did, but I hope that what we've got for you today is interesting and informative. So without any further ado, and that's what we've got planned for today. Quick welcome, as usual, the family history news and gossip. Some interesting snippets in there this morning. And a special feature. One of the difficulties of having a virtual meeting is that it's virtually all me. So today, with the wonderful assistance of Paul, we're going to try to provide a different perspective and a different voice. Then our main feature will be a look at Trove and the recent changes to the interface and what that might mean for you. Then a little later, a quick look back at the indexes of QSA. At our last meeting, I looked at archive search, the catalogue search, and had naively assumed that the indexes still work the same way they always had, but that's not quite the case. And we'll finally finish up with items for your diary to keep you off the streets for the next couple of weeks. But just before we do that, I'm going to come over all serious for a minute and just climb up on my soapbox for a minute. Back on 23rd of June, when I first was crazy enough to hold one of these virtual meetings, I began by talking about why I was doing it. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to remember what I said. I had to look back at what passes for a script around here to find out. But I think it's important to revisit it because there have been quite a few changes. Even though time seems to pass very slowly, there's a heck of a lot has happened since the 23rd of June. And one of them is that every time you look around, there seems to be a new webinar going on. GSQ are running them, QFHS, State Library, QSA have run some. And you've got to ask yourself, in this environment, do we really need these virtual meetings? Now, I've got nothing against webinars, and there are lots of good reasons for doing webinars. At the time, they were a money raiser, and they work for raising money. You can use it for building a profile, enhancing your reputation. As I say, webinars are useful for a lot of things. A couple of things they don't do. They're very poor at developing individuals, and they are absolutely useless for building and sustaining communities. And that's really what I think we're about. I love the fact that purely by accident, when I built the website, the first menu item there is about us. One of the consequences of this last 6 months is that a lot of people are looking at how they spend their lives and rethinking. I know I'm coming to the view that a lot of the things that I used to devote time to sort of semi-automatically, I doubt that I'll ever go back to. One of the things I am looking forward to going back to is spending Tuesdays at the library with a great bunch of people. And that's not going to happen by accident. We're not quite sure when we'll be able to do that. But more importantly than when we can open is I want to make sure that you're all there, that we get the gang back together. We need to sustain the group. We need to keep you operating. And that's why I'm doing this. Psychologists tell us it takes about 60 days to form a new habit or to break an old one. It's a good deal more than 60 days since we got together at Strathpine Library. I don't want the habit of going down to the library on Tuesdays to be broken. I think the best way that we can do this is to provide this substitute. It's a poor substitute. There's a lot of things that we can do in meetings that we can't, but we're working on improving it, and I hope you'll find that today is a little more meeting-like than some of the others. Ooh, I came over all Alan Jones there for a minute, which is a bit of a worry, because it doesn't matter what high-sounding words I use, if this isn't an interesting meeting, it's going to be a flop. So let's get the damn thing underway. Pop up the news and gossip for the week. What has happened lately? Well, this is one that you'll need to act on quickly. I got another reminder email telling me that MyHeritage free photo enhancement is still going, only for another 2 or 3 days. So if you haven't taken advantage of it, don't shut down this meeting now. But as soon as we finish, jump onto MyHeritage and start processing pickies. Some of the results are absolutely outstanding. In my mail this week, I got a copy of the Family History Federation's really useful bulletin. It's a 4 or 5 pager, and one that jumped out at me was this reference to the online Genealogical Index. Sounds a really old thing, but it's not the old IGI. This is a new one. I haven't got time to look at it in detail, but let's have a look at what happens if we flick through to it. Here's the search page, and the first thing you notice is, well, where's the place to enter my ancestors' names? Well, there isn't one, because this is a place for finding records, or finding the locations of records, so you can then search for the records. So I threw in England, the county of Yorkshire, and the town of Goole, where my Sotheby ancestors came from, and suggested 1820 to 1870, I think. Ran a search, and this is what it showed me. All the places that I might hope to find records that referred to the township of Goole. Some of these I knew, some of them I didn't. I certainly didn't know that on Ancestry there was a reference to long-term inmates of the Goole workhouse in 1861. Well worth going and look at. You notice on the right-hand side under cost, it lists both paid and free sources. If you think that you've exhausted all the possibilities of searching for your ancestors, this might well be the place to send you off on some new searches, some wonderful new rabbit holes to slide down and lose an afternoon or even a whole weekend. And if you're interested in receiving your own copy of the really useful bulletin from the Family History Federation, there's the URL, www.familyhistoryfederation.com. Don't worry, I'll put it on our website in the summary of today's meeting. And the trick is, as with most of these sign-ups, scroll to the bottom. It's a very long page. I've sliced a lot out of the middle to show it to you here. But right down at the bottom, there's the place where you can put your name and email address. It comes about once every 6 weeks, perhaps. It's infrequent enough that it's a pleasant surprise when it turns up. Also in the inbox this week, Dispatch, the newsletter of the Public Record Office of Victoria, PROV, which is the Victorian equivalent of QSA, of course, sends this out monthly, and always lots of interesting things in it. A couple that I thought I'd draw your attention to, that PROV celebrated Family History Month by running a series of webinars, of course, and they've preserved them and put them all up on YouTube. It's a horrible URL, so again, I'll post it on the website before lunch today. But there are 5 little short videos, 3 to 4 minutes, on how to search for Victorian records. Might well be an interesting way to spend an afternoon. Now, you know, I love old jigsaw puzzles, and PROV has got on the bandwagon and has a collection. They have a link in the newsletter to this piece, which they originally published in May, and I thought, oh, damn, that's old news. But they've gone back and they've added another half dozen jigsaw puzzles to the bottom of the page. The horse-drawn bread van was interesting, but the railway sign writers doing the destination boards for the station, that is quite fun when you get up to around 200 pieces. And of course, the great thing about a digital jigsaw is you can make it as difficult as you like. I also noticed on Dispatch that PROV has a Facebook page. Now, since it's part of my social distancing not to deal with any of these social things, but I'm sure some of you out there might like to pop in and have a look at PROV's Facebook page, or you can sign up to get your own copy of Dispatch in your email, prov.vic.gov.au. And again, I'll put that URL on our website for you. You notice on the side of the banner there, the Victorian Archives Centre is temporarily closed. Not surprising given the situation in Victoria. And that's particularly bad news for them because the National Archives is in the same in the same room. You go into one reading room in North Melbourne and you can get National Archives and PROV records, but not at the moment, of course. Which reminds us that the State Library has a special page indicating what's open. And I noticed that John Oxley Library is now open for 2 sessions a day. And if you go to the State Library website, slq.qld.gov.au/alerts, you'll get the very latest information on what's on. And don't forget, of course, the Moreton Bay Library website also has a page on the impact of the virus and various mitigating measures, updated Friday the 28th. And a couple of things jumped out at me. In-library events will be reintroduced in a planned stage approach. Each event will comply, In-library event attendance will be limited in line with social distancing requirements and by the 1 person per 4 square metre rule. Now, that's not really good news for us because if we get a good roll-up, 40 to 50 people, we would need 150, 200 square metres to occupy us, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, which I guess is why I think us staying together virtually is so important. What else caught my eye this week? Oh yes, Queensland State Archives announced that from Saturday the 4th till Sunday the 6th, archive search would be unavailable intermittently due to scheduled maintenance. Now, that was last Saturday to Sunday, so why am I telling you this when it's too late to do anything about it? Well, because this archive search software was only installed about 8 weeks ago. Scheduled maintenance on something that went live 8 weeks ago is never a good sign. So I'm suggesting proceed with caution when you're using archive search. I've not yet had the opportunity to get in and look at all of the things which worried me in the past. I suspect, but I haven't yet proven, that something that was rather badly bent last week is now completely broken. So if you are having trouble with archive search, don't necessarily assume that it's you. It might well be a little blip in the system. And that's about the news that caught my eye this week. Don't forget, of course, that we've still got access to Ancestry and Find My Past for free through the library. So if you do use that online genealogical index, remember things which it says are paid might actually be free to you through the library site. For a task that seems so simple, printing an image from Ancestry is amazingly frustrating. Here we see I'm in Ancestry. I've repeated my search for the female ancestors of my wife called Cornelia Medwell, and the top record I have here apparently shows me an image of the England and Wales National Probate Calendar. That sounds pretty interesting. Let's have a look. So I'll view the image. Shows me a page with lots of entries beginning ME. So I'll just slide the document around, and there's Cornelia Medwell of Northborough, spinster. I wouldn't be at all surprised if my wife was happy to have a look at that page. So what, you normally just hit Control P, don't you? But what you normally do in these circumstances simply does not work. What it will do is print a description of the record, not an image. So let's cancel out of there and have a look at what we really need to do. And the top right of the image viewer, there's a toolbar. The third button down shows an icon of a hammer and a spanner. Click on it. It allows you to rotate, to flip, to play with the colours in the image. But the simple thing that we want to do is print right at the top. And it immediately offers us the option of printing the entire image, which is what I want here, or if I wanted to print a zoomed in view so I could focus just on a particular entry. But I'll take the whole page, thanks. And there's my preview, exactly as I was hoping for. So I'm more than happy to hit print on that one. It's been quite a while, but I do know that Paul likes to get together for a chat over coffee. So that's what we're doing here this morning. Here are the two of us side by side, quite literally having a chat over coffee. Unfortunately, we've had to provide our own coffee, but here we go.
Hi Bob, and hi everybody. It is nice to get together. It's especially nice to get together for coffee. And yeah, there hasn't been enough meeting up for chats just in recent times. So it's good that we can do this today. And hopefully we'll be more face-to-face shortly.
Yep. Now, Paul, I'm going to ask you in a couple of minutes to actually spell out exactly what you have done. Can you believe it's 27 weeks since we last had a meeting? It's quite amazing, isn't it? But I'll ask you to, try to condense all of your achievements in the last half year into a couple of minutes for the group. I do know that you're a man of many parts. You've got to fit in your tennis, your bike riding, your Italian lessons, learning to play music. Have you been able to fit in anything else interesting while we've been locked down?
In fact, Bob, I was hoping to fit in lots of things because I thought lots more time. You get lots more stuff done. Fabulous. I'll be able to knock out this one name study in no time. Unfortunately, that's not quite the way it turned out. And when people ask me, how long have you been doing this one name study thing? I said, well, when I started, I thought this is a big job, so it could take 3 years or so. Well, it's been 6 now, and I think I've probably got another 10 or 15 to go. So I haven't got a lot done. I haven't been watching Netflix, I promise. I did decide that this would be an ideal time for me to learn to touch type because that would enhance my productivity through the roof. And so far I have done one lesson, which, thank you for reminding me that it's 27 weeks. That's really made me feel productive, yeah. yeah, 27 weeks. I'm not sure that what I have got done would qualify, is justified by the 27-week time lag. Perhaps it's just as well I'm not getting paid for this. I have started learning to play bass, which is good, and I'm really enjoying that. Tennis is back on now. I'm back at Italian intermittently. But one of the big things that I did do was I had downloaded some more data from the UK TNA, who usually charge £3.50 or about $7 for each of their digitised records. And I've been able to get more than 50 of them for free. I do like that. So that's about $350 plus that I have saved in doing that. So that's a productive use of time. One of the big tasks that I wanted to do was have a review of this whole one name study thing and look at where I'm at with it, just a process review and status update sort of thing. And it shouldn't really take that long because there's only 7 things that you have to do. They cover this in the 7 pillars of wisdom of one name studies, and I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But I have been collecting data furiously. You know me, I like chasing bright, shiny objects. I have been in contact with other people, other researchers, people who contacted me through my website or through Ancestry or something and said, oh, yeah, my grandfather was such and such, and do you know about him or whatever? So I'm getting quite a few more of those now, which is good. That does take up a bit of time, but no, that's good. You learn more things and you can share data with people.
Okay, well, that sounds like a great spot for us to end this little casual chat and to pass control over to you, Paul, so that you can give us in a little more detail how you've spent the last 6 months. So thanks very much, Paul. Over to you.
Having thought that I would get a lot of things done, I decided that it was time to focus on a couple of aspects of this big review that I'm doing of the one name study. And I wanted to focus on 3 of the 7 pillars, and you can see them there on the screen. The publicised part, the published part, and the preserved part, because these are things that have worried me for a while. Firstly, in terms of publicising it, I wanted to do this so that I could get people to help me out and get other people to do things with me, maybe even for me, you never know your luck. But I started a website, and it's not big, it's not fancy, but it's there, and it has attracted quite a few people to make contact with me and offer me information that they have got. We share data, we talk about things, and some of these people are actually related and some are not. And I realised afterwards, well, another way of doing this might be to start a Facebook group. So I started a Facebook group, and again, some people see that, some people don't see that, some people respond, some people don't respond, but it's another way of me getting information out there that people can look at, and hopefully it triggers something in them that makes them contact me. Limited success. But the downside with both the website and the Facebook group, and there is a blog which is a subset of the website, downside with all of those is that they depend on my capacity to write things. It only works if I write stuff and publish it. And well, it's fair to say that I haven't been as diligent in that respect as I could have, and it all takes time, and it's not as exciting as the looking at the bright shiny objects part of the study. So there's a limited amount of stuff that I put out there, and so I realised that what I really needed was something extra. And the other thing is, the only data that gets presented to people here is when I write a particular story about something. That might be a very short thing, Facebook post, or it might be a longer thing on the blog, or publishing some data about the 1841 census. But not much data actually gets out there, and I've got a lot of information that nobody else will ever see. So I was thinking about, how do I manage to disseminate more of the data that I've got. So that was a problem that I was bearing in mind. In terms of one of the other parts of the study, the preserve bit. This is all about what happens when I'm not here. Does all of the research that I've done get lost? The Goons, the Guild of One Name Studies, they started a couple of years ago. They started a members website project, and the reason for that was that even in some people had studies and they just got lost. The rallies threw them out because they didn't think it was worth anything. They weren't interested in it. Some people even have websites, but once the person who's running that website, the administrator, passes away and people stop paying the hosting fees, this thing stops being hosted. So what they have done is they've started a members website project whereby they undertake that for members, they will host your web page ad infinitum, which is a nice thing. So I thought, after not doing anything for a couple of years, we actually had a Zoom guild members meeting for Australia and New Zealand during this little COVID episode. And I decided maybe I should do that. Maybe I should get into that. So I have started that in the project. So that's my website. There is now an identical website to this, which is preserved on the Guild members website project. So that will run even after me. So that's part of the preservation stuff. But again, it's only preserving some of the information, not preserving all of it. So what I was thinking about how I go that, and I thought, I've got this big database in Legacy and all of these files on my computer. How do I get them out there? And I had heard previously about a software program called TNG, the Next Generation. And what it does is it takes your database, like Legacy, or in actual fact a TNG database preferably, and it will publish it as a web page. And I had looked at that before, and I've decided not to do anything with it because, the TNG websites looked a bit ugly, I thought. Not that mine's anything flash, but the TNG websites looked a bit ugly. And it meant, or at least I thought it meant, getting another database. How am I ever going to, I don't want to populate something else. But what I have found out through a bit of research is that this TNG platform will accept a GEDCOM, and you can start a website using the GEDCOM from your existing database. And the absolute good news of all of this was that on my Guild members website, I can have my existing website and I can add in a link to a TNG website. And so I purchased a license and worked with a very, very helpful person from the Guild as to how we set this up. And it creates a website. This is a demo website of the, and as you can see, you have a website and then they have a search bar that goes along here, and you can look for things. You can search for things. You can look at photos, documents, headstones, etc. There's information about different aspects. Really nice presentation of information, even if you don't like the layout. And you can see here that there is a list of photos. These are all attached to a particular person. You hover over them, that comes up. You can select them, you can do lots of things with them, change the comments which are beside them. You can look at headstones. Just by going to this thing here, you drop down, select something else, it comes up with it. So they have headstones and things like this. It's not so clear, but virtually all of your information can be presented. And if you go the second step and add all of the media items, then all of the photos, documents, etc. Let's say if we search here. Okay, so you can publish an image of the census. So all of that stuff was quite attractive to me to be able to do that. So I thought, well, I'll give that a go. And I looked at some of the other Guild members and their websites, and they had, this is one which is purely the TNG thing. They don't have their own website standalone, but it's got the same thing. It's got these records. This one has happened to be land records, and you hover over them, and it shows you the particular item for it. This next one is a guy from the Guild, and he already had his own website, and this is his website, but hosted by the One Name Guild with this extra menu in here. And from that menu, you can find people's search by surname, first name, families, places, dates, etc., etc. All of those things will a nice search facility. And then this is all of the media, the photos, the documents, the headstones, all sorts of different things that you can put in there, and you can vary which items you're going to select. And I like the layout of this more, but if you go to this page, this looks more of the TNG layout. So this is something that I would like to model my my website on, to just the layout and the cleanliness and lack of clutter, etc. And so hopefully we'll be able to go to things and look at his documents or photos, etc., and see something similar on mine. I haven't got a long way on this. I've made a start, and I'm working on it. I'm learning, making it up as I go, something like that. Where I have got to is, this is my standard website. This is the standard website on the members website project, and there is now a new, just in here, a new menu item called the TNG database. And when we click on that, it just takes us to basically a blank page which says you need to click on this button to go and see the database. When you do click on that button, you get this. These links at the top are the standard things that they use. They have, for people charting their own family, we have his side of the family and her side of the family, and then a couple of other sections that you can put in as well. So obviously I need to tailor those to my requirements. And you get the little bits down the bottom here, which show us the documents, headstones, etc. I have so far managed to load my GEDCOM and get all of the data in there. So I have the people's names, I have all of their dates and things like that, dates, places, relationships, etc. That's all in there. And if I search for people whose names are Tuppen, there's 1,145 of them up here. And this is the first of 23 pages with 50 on it. And it looks like that. So that's step one, to get all of the people in there. The second step, which I haven't got to yet, is I can go over here to the find and go to photos and click on photos. And I've only put a few in so far. This is the photo of Charles the Shepherd, my 2 times great-grandfather. Lovely photo, best dressed he's been in his entire life, I would think. There's a marriage certificate here, and there's a headstone here, which I had hoped to put in the section marked headstones, but that's not where it's gone. So more learning required, Paul. But it's interesting stuff, and it's kept me out of mischief, and hopefully it will lead to many more people having a lot more visibility of the data that I have stored. So I'm hoping that's a productive use of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Who doesn't love a wedding? But some of our ancestors seem to be fonder of marriage than others. And as you know, legacy allows you to store that information and to display it quite quickly. Here we see, in the bottom of the family panel, that Cecilia has 2 husbands, not at the same time, of course. Edward Lloyd had just 1. We can find the details of Cecilia's other husband by clicking on this same icon. And it tells us it was Richard Pringle. But we can close that little window and get the same information far more easily. Did you know if you hover the cursor over this margin, it provides us with this button which will allow us, as the tooltip says to rotate through the wife's spouses. So at the moment we're showing Edward Lloyd. Give it a click and it gives us the details of Richard Pringle. Another click and we're back to Edward. Our main event for the day, a look at the changes that have happened to Trove. As you're probably aware, back in February, the National Library announced that Trove was going to be given a facelift. There was some previews available in February and March, a number of webinars that people could attend, and then around the middle of the year, the big change occurred. So we'll spend perhaps 20 minutes or so looking through what that might mean. We're back in business. Okay, so Trove has a new logo, but the same URL. So trove.nla.gov.au. And the most obvious change when you start it up is that every time you open Trove, you will be given this screen which advises you that the website can provide cultural advice, particularly to members of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and you need to specify whether you want to see this cultural advice. And I regard it as unfortunate. You have to do it every time you start it up, because it appears before the login. This will be seen on the top of the page, and you notice in the top right corner there's an option to log in. As before, you don't need to have an account on Trove. You can operate without it, but a number of the things I'm going to show you today require you to have one, and really I think the advantages are enormous. So I would always log in using my username and password, and once you've done that, your username appears up on the top there, and you can go back to the start. This time, of course, because you've already indicated you don't want cultural advice, it's not there. The search box is in the middle of the big purple rectangle. So while I was preparing this talk, I was also looking at how we might do something about our pioneering settlers. So I made my search for John Todd, in quotes, indicating I wanted those words close together, and Launton, because that's where John lived, or at least that's what the place that he lived is now called. And having entered that there, the big green magnifying glass doesn't indicate that it will zoom and make things bigger. It's an Inspector Gadget magnifying glass for searching. And when you click on it, this is the new results page. And there's the striking thing about the new look of Trove is it's white. It's very white. There's a lot of white space. And I understand the designers are very proud of that. They don't think it's a problem. It's a feature. So the rest of us will learn to live with it. You notice it tells me that there are 109 total references. If I see if I can get my magic red pointer here. 109 total results in newspapers and gazettes. It's showing me 3 of them, so obviously I'll need to scroll down. And the other 106 remain hidden, because by default, Trove will only show you 3 results. Even though all these other categories have no results in them, it uses a whole screen to tell me that. So usually you will want something different. So what we can do is just back up a moment and go back to where I entered my search terms, and instead of going straight to the green magnifier, drop down the little menu called All Categories, and underneath it you'll see a list of the categories in which Trove stores information. I'm interested in searching newspapers and gazettes, so select that, click, and I now am shown all 109 results. So I wanted to back up. An alternative, if I'm looking at the 3 results there, is up above the search bar, the categories are also listed. I can select newspapers and gazettes, and that's all that I will see. Or, there's many ways of skinning this particular cat. We can go back, and here we're looking at our 3 results, and notice under the green magnifier there's a thing called Advanced Search. Click on it, and it pops down the same set of categories that we saw in the search bar. Click on newspapers and gazettes, and it seems to have opened up Advanced Search. Well, it has opened up Advanced Search, but scroll down and you'll see that all 109 results in newspapers and gazettes are underneath. Scroll back up to the top, locate Hide Advanced Search or Simple Search, click on one of those, and we've got our 109 results. So by default, Trove shows you only 3. You'll need to use one of those hacks, tweaks, to get to see a full list as you are accustomed to. I don't think it's a problem that there are all those different ways of doing it, because some of them I think, oh, that makes sense, and others I say, oh, that's a stupid way of doing it. And I'm sure that there are other users who have exactly the opposite opinion to me. So I suggest you go in, run a couple of searches, test them out, and the one that feels right will become your new habit. But however you get there, you'll come to a page which has these 2 features. Now, if you don't see the big box down the right-hand side called Refine Your Results, you're only part way in. You're still looking at the headlines only, top 3 type thing. Similarly, across the top, Sort By. Now, it sorts by relevance. That's artificial intelligence relevance, not what I want. I find that my particular computer has a major problem. It does what I tell it rather than what I want it to do, and Trove seems to suffer from the same difficulty. So you might need to think about, well, relevance. Is it relevant? My personal preference is to drop that down where the options are sort by time. I generally go for earliest first, the first reference in the database. I know others like to work from the latest result, usually 1955, and go backwards. Personal preference, but set it the way you would like. So here, I've set it to earliest first, but there's only 82 results showing. Why is that? Because I also made a choice over here. If we just quickly go back, you see here I can specify the place that I want to search. Quickly back to where we were. It's only showing me the 82 papers from Queensland. And to remind me of that, I've got a blue bar up here showing place Queensland. I notice an interesting fact here that searching for John Todd of Launton, here we have John Todd, Launton, North Coast Railway, that's my man. And on the same story, John W. Todd. And it turns out John W. Todd is a real estate agent. He's no relation to the John Todd that I was interested in, but as a real estate agent, his name appears in the papers a lot. So to simplify this, I added something to my search bar. I put in John W. Todd, all in quotes, and added a minus sign at the front. So I'm saying I want all stories that include the name John Todd, the word Launton, but any that have John W. Todd, forget it. Now, there are some other features that I can do here. You probably remember under old Trove, these were on the left-hand margin. I was sure that I would hate this. I've become very accustomed to going across to the right margin to deal with these facets. And an area which is of particular interest to family historians, of course, are the family notices. So I can select no, I can't. Oh, that's taking out all the John W. Todds first. 29 total results now. Now I can select family notices, and I get a second bar at the top here, place, Queensland, category family notices, and I only have 10 total results. I've got that down to a reasonably manageable number. It's time to select one of those. So let's click on one and we go through to the display page. Now this is the area which has changed least in the new look Trove. One of the things that puzzled me was this odd line break over here, and I thought, oh, is that different? No, it's not. It's simply because of the way I have my screen set up. If you do get that, you can just grab this bar here and drag it across and it will fit nicely. Doesn't matter how much further I drag it, that is the end of the line because it corresponds exactly to the end of the line here. By the Reverend full stop, by the Reverend full stop. So that just cleans it up. You notice also I've magnified this area here, exactly the same icon as before, except they were green last time, now they're blue. This is a familiar button or a familiar icon. It shows the whole page, and the orange square on it is showing the section of the page that I'm looking at. Sometimes I find that useful, other times I think it's just damned annoying. If it is, click on the minus sign and it goes away and replaced with a blue plus, which you can use to bring it back. This one up in the top right corner lets you essentially full screen the image. They've always been available, sometimes in slightly different places. So here's the OCR text, here's the image of the page. Notice the search terms appear highlighted in here with this orange highlight. What I'm going to do now is click over here in this black margin, which in fact is a slide-in menu. So when I click on that, it opens up this one. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about lists. They're not new. There's slight changes in the way that they work, but I think it's a really important feature that not many people used as fully as they could. So I'm going to get a bit preachy and say you really should be using this. You notice here is the list button. It's opened it up and it tells me that this story appears in these lists. John Todd Launton. Well, wasn't it convenient that there was a list that corresponded exactly to my search? Well, it's not convenient at all because I made the list. And if we move on to look at a couple of other examples, we'll see how. But before we do that, keep an eye on the script, Bob. Let's look at another button down here. Here's lists, button down here called download. Click on it and it opens up and says, do you want this as an image? That is an image of this page, a PDF, a slightly different image of this page, or as text. I quite like to grab them as text, and if I click on that, it opens up here. The disadvantage here is that it's showing me the text of the whole section, all of the family notices. So what I've had to do is go in and just select the one that I'm interested in, drag the mouse over it, copy it, and paste it. So let's jump back to our list and choose another story to look at. And here's one. You see I've done the same thing. I've magnified it up. I've opened up the list, but it looks very different. Just to remind you, that's what we had before. Now, what's going on here? Well, the difference is that this newspaper story hasn't been added to any lists. So we've got an add button. What are all these? Well, Trove has anticipated that I will want to add it to a list that I already have. So in this column, it shows me a list of all the lists, or a menu of all the lists that I've used. In this case, I'm going to add it on there. But just in case I don't already have a list ready, I can use the blue button to add an extra list, which is what I did to create John Todd in the first place. But I can simply click on here and it shows that it's now included in that list. But I've zoomed out a little bit and had a look at my profile over here, because when I click on my username, it shows I have a list. I have a list of lists. So what we're looking at here is also available there. And here we see that I have in fact 57 lists. Hard to keep track of, but it does allow me to search. So if I enter the name John Todd in here, it brings up any list of mine that contains the word John Todd, which is just one at the moment. Good. I'm able to manage this list. Click on it, and it shows me that I have a list. It's a public list. I can choose when I create it whether it's something that I'm happy for other people to look at, or one that I want to use purely for my own research. If I'd made an amazing discovery and I didn't want anybody else to get a pointer to the sources that I was using before I'd finished writing my book, I could keep it as a private list. In this case, I've made it a public list. It contains 2 items. It indicates who created it, my username, and the day that I created it, 21st of August. There are handles here, which I can grip with the mouse and drag them into a different order if I wish. Each item in the list shows me the title of the story, the category, the type of story in the paper, the name of the paper, the date of publication, the page in the paper, and the date on which I added it to the list. And I paused there because I doubt very much whether the Queenslander had 632 pages on Saturday, 7th of April 1900. That may be an interesting little blip in there. Couple of things that I can do. I can download this list if I wish to. I can remove any item from the list with the rubbish bin, but I can also add a list item note. Now here, because both of these items that I've added to the list came from family notices, that's the heading. So I've got no idea which event these notices referred to. So if I edit this one, you can see I've added a note. This is the death from illness of a grandson of John Todd during military training, which would tidy up the fact that, in fact, this family notice occurs after the death of John that I was interested in. So you can add anything there which will make it easier to interpret why you've added it to the list. And you notice I've also written a description of the whole list. Why have I made this list? Because John Todd was a pioneer of the Lawton locality in what became the Shire of Pine Rivers, took up land west of the railway line around what is now the alignment of Todd's Road. So if I come back to this in 10 years' time, it will be obvious to me, I hope, if I've still got all my marbles, why I created this list. And if someone else comes across it, and why is this bloke interested, they can see why I've done that. You notice there's an icon here that says I can add a web page at the beginning of my list. And this example shows why you would want to do it. This is a list that I made up in one of my other lives for the Queensland Women's Historical Association. And it's made up of references to a lady called Beryl Donkin, who was in fact the first woman to become Secretary of the Queensland Law Society. It was a real glass ceiling to be shattered to have a woman in such a role for the solicitors. And I was tempted to try to write a fuller description of Beryl's life here. And then I realised that here was a website which gives a full biography of Beryl Donkin. So all I did was add it as a web page at the top. So if I come back in here, the first thing I'm given is a link to a web page where I can check who was Beryl, why was she important, and that sets the context for all of the articles which I've attached lower down. You can in fact add a photograph if you can find one to really make this a useful list, and then of course if you download it, it becomes valuable outside of Trove. Now if we just scroll down a little to have a look at what else we know about Beryl, this was a fascinating article. These green things are called tags, and I didn't put them there. What's happened here is that I have added to my list an article that a lot of people are interested in for a lot of different reasons. So people have put a tag on this story with the name of someone that they are researching so they can come back and find it. Because I've added the story to my list, the tags come with it. One of the reasons that we have so many stories here is that this was when Beryl was organising an important legal conference in Brisbane, and as part of the conference, as you sometimes do, they arranged some social events. And this was a report on the what used to be called the women's page of the paper, explaining who was going where to which cafe and which social event. So lots of people have picked up different parts of that article. Most of these people have nothing to do with Beryl, but the tags are there. So since we're talking about tags, let's go back and have a look. Here we're looking at my profile, lists. All the lists that I have are down here, but I think we can also have a look at my tags. I've used a lot fewer than lists because somewhere along the way I decided that lists were a little better for me than tags. Notice some of these have padlocks on them, so they're private tags. Some of them are public. I'm not sure that there was a terribly considered decision there. You will probably recognise some of these as indicating things I've used in research for talks. There's two of my lady doctors, Ella Bourne and Ella Greenham. I used a tag to indicate articles in which they were both named. Now I have a list for Dr. Bourne and a list for Dr. Greenham, but I can see in my Bourne list, if it's got that tag on it, it also will be in the Greenham list, and so on. This one, of course, you probably remember, Mrs. Blackman Military Medal. She was the lady who, it was reported in the press, had won a military medal whilst an ambulance driver in the First War. And the great thing about these tags is if you click on them, it's just like doing a search. Well, it does do a search. It searches for items which have that tag. Don't be fooled by the fact, oh, there's only 3 of them. No, that tag has been applied to 31 total results, where in this strange only show you the top 3 again. So we need to do whichever of the techniques. If I click up here, it should show me all the tags in newspapers and gazettes, and there it is. We can use any of the filtering down here. Notice instead of a blue filter, we've got a green one to show us that it was tagged Blackman MM. And if I wish, I can click on any of these links to take me through and read the article. So lists and tags, 2 very useful ways of highlighting items in Trove in which you're interested. And you notice here, that was the list menu, and here we have a luggage tag shape, and it's one tag has been applied to this. So let's go back again. Back to my profile. We've looked at my list, we've looked at my tags. What about my notes? Now this is a really odd one. These are not the notes that I've applied to a list. They're notes that I've applied directly to an article. And when you look at some of them, you think, well, what possible use is that? Here we have an article called Shipping Intelligence. It's the Moreton Bay Courier, 1861. Ship arrived in Moreton Bay, and on the 17th of December 2019, fairly early in the night, 21:23, I applied this note, which by itself looks fairly useless. But the beauty of these notes is in context. If I open this article, the note appears beside it, and I remember now. This was Matthew Goggs. Now, Matthew Goggs is a fascinating character. He lived here in Queensland, out at Cunnamulla, married, took his wife home to England, and when he returned, he had a different wife. So that's of some interest. But why I'm interested here is that before he left, Matthew passed managership of his business interests over to a man named Coley. Now, that's the same name as my wife's maiden name. Not a relation, but an interesting person nonetheless. And here we see Matthew, Mr. and Mrs. Goggs arrived. Have they just come back from England? Miss Coley travelling with them. Is she the sister of his business manager? And if so, was she in England with them? This question reminds me of the odd thoughts that I had. I really must follow this up. It's a private note. It's locked. It won't make any sense to anyone else, but it's a way for me to attach thoughts, questions, speculations directly to a record in Trove. So a quick summary. We can pop out this black menu on the left-hand side of any article. These form a group: tags, lists and notes. Remember also that downloads is down here on a different tab, but all of these can help us to organise what we're doing in Trove. Now, I've covered a lot. We've taken quite a lot of time, and we haven't had time to get to, within newspapers and gazettes, the difference between a simple and an advanced search, downloading images and PDF rather than just text, using other filters like filtering by the title of the paper or filtering by the date of publication, how to make corrections in the newspapers and gazettes, special features of the gazettes. I've only used newspapers simply by making some choices that meant that gazettes don't appear, but that's another interesting feature. And then, of course, there are 8 other categories that we haven't looked at. Particularly, where's the Woman's Weekly gone? It used to be available in newspapers. Now it's not. It's been moved to a new category called magazines and newsletters that's well worth study in its own right. Tags and lists work differently in the other categories. What about libraries? What about the web archive? There's a whole lot more in Trove that we haven't covered, but there is a limit to how long I can talk and you can sit. I do encourage you, if you are, don't just rush past this opening page. Scroll down. You'll find some interesting things at the bottom. For example, Investigate Your Family History provides links to a lot of useful websites. But one of the reasons that they made the change was they wanted to be able to provide interesting snippets that would attract attention. Now, unfortunately, this one's way down the bottom of the page, but it really is an interesting thing, mystery object. So if you were to click on that, this highlights one of the things that grumpy old men don't like about the new Trove. I mean, I like white space, it's restful on the eye, but this is just ridiculously wasteful. But no, stop Bob, we're being positive today. Here we have a photograph, a little potted example. Some of the things you can get, of course, we can click on Cite This. It tells us exactly how we should indicate that we've used this photograph. You can make your choice about which system of citation you want to use and copy it to the clipboard, or we can come back up here to View and click that, which takes us to this description of it. But here we have a little tiny icon which indicates there's an external web link. Click on it and we can go straight out to the State Library of Victoria to have a look at the full object. And we've got magnifier here, which means we can look at this photograph in very great detail. But let's go back. Further down on that description page, we have these, and yes, they are tags, even though they're green or white background with green text rather than green with white. I told you the tags are a little different elsewhere, but we can still do the same things with them. We can click and go through, and it shows a whole lot of other references that we can find. So Trove is indeed much more than just the newspapers, but it will take much longer than we have today to cover all those details. And remember, wherever you go in Trove, if you see that icon, click on it, it will take you back to the start and you can begin your search over again. Well, it's well known that the passenger lists held by the state archives are incomplete because of records that were lost in the 1893 flood. And we've heard stories that there are, in fact, records in the National Archives that can cover some of those missing records at QSA. Well, we begin here at the NAA record search page. We're going to carry out an advanced search, and we're going to search for items. We need to enter 3 pieces of information. The first is the series number. Series J715 contains all the records that relate to inward shipping into Brisbane. Those which have been transferred from microfilm rolls have a control symbol that begins ROLL followed by a number. Since we don't know which number we want, we'll use the asterisk as a wildcard. And thirdly, we want those items which are digital copies. Select Search, and here we see the first 20 of 43 records. It's probably easiest to sort them into date range. Simply scroll down to find the period in which you are interested. Here, Roll 3 contains January 1875 to November 1880. This indicates that a digital copy is available, so click on that and you can browse to your heart's content. To use the indexes provided by the volunteers at the Queensland State Archives, we begin here on the home page and select this block called Start Your Research. At the top right of the page, just under Archive Search Catalogue, we see Search the Indexes. Select that. The next page you see provides access to a number of collections of indices. I'm interested in immigration, so that's the one I'll open. Again, I have a number of choices to make, but I find this is the largest index. While it doesn't contain all the entries, there's a greater chance that the one you're looking for is in there than any of the others, so it's a good place to start. Assisted Immigration 1848 to 1912. Click on that and it opens up this. I'll begin by typing in the family name, Davis, Davies, and clicking the magnifier. Give it a moment to do its thing, and you see it's found 597 results. I need to refine my results. Now, I can use any one field to do this. The common factor is that they all arrived on the ship Corona. So we type that in and hit the magnifier, and there we have the Davis family who arrived in the Corona, in fact, on the 6th of March 1884. Now I know it looks as though others here arrived on different dates. They are in fact some errors which have crept into the index. QSA is aware of them and is attempting to stamp them out. As a result, not all of these items are linked correctly, but I know that Aunt Sally's entry is one that does work. So let's go in here, click the down arrow to open up the detail. It doesn't tell us a whole lot more, other than that she was 9 when she arrived, which is a good way of checking that we've got the correct family, and that what we're looking for, the shipping list, is on page 229 of some record, which was originally microfilmed and then was made into a digital image. Now, until June this year, if you clicked here on item details, you would have been taken directly to a PDF file of that digital image. That is no longer the case. Since the archive search, catalogue search, was updated. The two systems are now partly linked together. So when I click here, I will be taken to the results of an archive search. Now, don't be too concerned if this page doesn't load for you quite as quickly as it appears to have done for me. I must confess I used a little bit of editing trickery to overcome the fact that a number of these pages are incredibly slow to load. The more records there are associated with them, the longer it takes. And as you'll see when I click here to view the digital copy, it's not just the passenger list of the Corona that is attached to this record, but a whole lot of ships, and that's what's slowing it down. So we need to scroll down here until we find the entry for the Corona. There it is, the Corona 1884. And it did say that I could view the digital file, but that's not going to happen immediately. When I click here, it is in fact going to download onto my computer, and I will then need to open it in order to view it. And here we see the passenger list for the voyage of the Corona in 1884. You see this is page 228, and the index told us that Sarah's entry would be on page 229, so we'll scroll down one page. And there we see the Davis family. My great-grandmother Jane. So there we have found the passenger list for the Davises arriving on the Corona. Okay, well, that was intended to tidy up the QSA situation. In fact, I prepared that before last Sunday's scheduled maintenance. It remains to be seen whether any further problems have occurred. I suspect they have dealt with the slow opening of item records which are linked to a lot of digital images. I wouldn't say it was terribly successful because on my quick test they now don't open at all, but it no longer opens slowly. But it looks like we're going to need to investigate QSA, archive search and indices again. So if we move now to our final stage, and as always I've talked way too much, but just quickly through some of the things which we have got coming up. I have scheduled at this stage at least 4 more virtual meetings for the year. Let me know if you don't want them. November the 24th should have been our Christmas breakup. I would love to come up with a way where we can get together virtually for that. I'm still looking. I'll let you know. A couple of other things coming up. September the 15th, an interesting series from QSA called Research Reveals. They have given fellowships to historians to get into, QSA, State Library this is, gave fellowships to historians to get into the records and see what they can find. And on September the 15th, Matthew Vengert, author of the book on the influenza pandemic that I believe was talked about yesterday on the webinar, he's going to present on a visual history of Queensland's government printing office. He's gone through all the photos in the State Library. Should be fascinating one to look at. And a couple of other things happening. I haven't yet got back to National Archives at Cannon Hill, but when I do, any time up to the end of December, there's a display in the foyer on the Lytton quarantine station. They've gone through some of the more interesting records they've got. As you see, plans, cartoons, passenger lists, and they're mounted in a display around the foyer. And finally, I mentioned this in the last Tweed meeting news. I don't know how I would cope with a full day of Zoom, but GSQ are certainly trying it out. October the 24th, a full day seminar, sitting at your computer. It will be an interesting experience, and if you would like to try it out, there's a brochure you can download. And that gets us to the end of yet another virtual meeting. Thank you all for your attendance.